All right, we are back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast, bringing you our fourth and final segment. Now, I mentioned this will be a little different than what our usual fourth segment is, which is the same thing I see here, which is news around the league. Now, usually I talk about maybe 7 to 15 topics around the league that are kind of minor news stories that I did want to touch upon. This one's going to be a little shorter, not that many ones, but I think some more notable ones that simply wouldn't be in their own segment, but I still wanted to talk about. So the first one is going to be about the MLBPA. So this is an interesting one that I wanted to touch upon. So the players are reportedly pressuring MLBPA Director Tony Clark to replace Deputy Director Bruce Meyer. So there's been a lot of situations bubbling within the MLBPA that they are unhappy with his right-hand guy, Deputy Director Bruce Meyer. A lot of minor leaguers and a lot of players are threatening to not comply with rules, I guess, in a way, if you want to put it nicely, if they do not fire this guy, Bruce Meyer. What's happening with him is a lot of disagreements on what's happening. Like, I just said that, sorry. A lot of disagreements on what he's been doing, what his rules have been, and overall just what's been happening with him. So first here we have frustrations from the player side of things stems from a number of topics: the stalled market for top free agents, the erosion of the middle class free agency, an overall decrease in the free agent spending, and the peculiar J.D. Davis release after he'd won an arbitration hearing all contribute to the interest per the reports. So basically, to kind of recap this in my own words, I'd say this is an article from MLBTradeRumors.com, by the way. Great website, of course. I'm sure if you're a baseball fan, you know them. All the news you can get there. Great website. It's basically they're just kind of disappointed in the way free agency has played out in the past few years or so. The first one, I'd say the stalled market for top free agents. Yeah, that's easy. I mean, we've talked about it throughout the show now. Jordan Montgomery, Blake Snell, Matt Chapman, Cody Bellinger were all on the market very well into spring training. You have Cody Bellinger, a guy who won an MVP in his career. Matt Chapman, one of the better third basemen in baseball. Jordan Montgomery, a World Series champion who was a big part of that team. And Blake Snell, who just won the Cy Young, for crying out loud, are still in the market. I think there's going to be a lot of unrest between the players because if you're a player, just for example, first one that comes to mind, if you're a player like Joey Wendell, okay, now this is a bad example because Wendell got signed early, but I think a lot of players like him are saying, okay, if I'm just a mediocre player, a guy who maybe starts once every few years, but mainly is a bench guy, kind of a fill-in guy on the 40-man chart, if they're not getting contracts and they're not being signed, why would I be signed? Because what do I bring that's better than them? I think that's a lot of the players' mindset, that they're thinking, if these big guys aren't getting signed, why would I get signed? And I think that's worrying them, which I think is fair. I definitely think that's fair, and I think that's part of the reason that they aren't happy with the MLBPA. Now, do I think it's all their fault? No, I don't. Do I think it's some of their fault? I do. I think there are some ways you would have to go about this. I think a lot of discussion has been made around if you make a signing deadline. I don't think that would be a great idea because I think that would force a lot of teams into making moves they would later regret. But again, I think you have to look at this a lot of ways, and you have to think about what are some ways we can solve this, what are some ways that this can continue and not be as impactful as it has been. I mean, as a baseball fan and as a guy who covers the sport now as a profession, it sucks. Really, it does, waiting for all these guys to sign and waiting for these guys to sign well into spring training when the season's about to start. I want them to sign early. I want to talk about it. I want to talk about segments about it. And it's not fun waiting. Is it fun with the rumors? Yes, but the rumors get old after 4 or 5 months of it. Hearing different teams over and over again. So overall, I think that there has to be some solution to this. I think a lot of players are pointing at Bruce Meyer as the guy who can fix it, and I think for good reason. I think he can be one of the guys to fix it, and overall, I think that's what has to be done. So I think they're going to have to see what can be done about this, and if he is the guy to fix it, and if he's not, they'll have to replace him, and what someone else can do about it. I think it's a very complex situation and scenario that someone is going to have to figure out, but hey, that's what they're hired for, right? I think that's what a lot of people will say, and I think that's a fair argument here. After that, we have the erosion of middle class free agency, which is kind of what I was talking about as well. I mean, going to a real-world example here, Tommy Pham, Michael Lorenzen, Mike Clevenger, J.D. Martinez, guys that maybe aren't. I would probably put JD Martinez out of that conversation, actually. But Tommy Pham, Michael Lorenzen, let's focus on them first, and then we'll talk about Clevenger. Tommy Pham, Michael Lorenzen, really impactful players. Are they stars? No, they're not stars. They're not superstars. They're not even that well-known of names. But if you're going to tell me that Tommy Pham and Michael Lorenzen can't make very good impacts to a team, I would disagree. Lorenzen's a very good starter. Tommy Pham's a really nice hitter. Two guys I think make a lot of teams a lot better. I mean, if you're the Padres, what's stopping you from signing Tommy Pham right now? I know we've talked about it a lot, but they're a perfect signing for him. They're a perfect spot for him. So I think that's the reason why they're kind of worried about that. They're seeing these guys who are still lingering on the market late into the year, and they're worrying about going into free agency, what that's going to hold for them if they are kind of a middle-class guy. If these impactful guys like Tommy Pham, like Michael Lorenzen, still on the market, what does that leave for me as a guy who may not be on their level? Mike Clevenger is a different situation because he does have some off-the-field problems, you could say, having some domestic violence allegations, going to counseling and being suspended by the league for a tiny bit last year. So that's, I think, different. But just looking at Tommy Pham and Michael Lorenzen, guys who haven't been suspended, who may have some personality things, especially with Pham, but still are great players. And I think it is a question they do have this year about what is going to happen with that. And I think it's a fair concern. After that, overall decrease in free agency spending, kind of the same thing I was saying. Teams don't really want to give the big bucks. You saw it with Snell, with Montgomery, with Chapman, all getting short-term deals when we thought they would get $100 million plus. Now, in my personal opinion, I don't think this has to do with teams not wanting to spend money as much as analytical ways. They're seeing a lot of signings in the past few years or so that you could have predicted maybe didn't go as well as you thought, and they didn't end up well. I mean, the obvious ones you want to talk about here are Javi Baez, Taijuan Walker, stuff like that. So I think that's more of teams being analytical and knowing which players to give big contracts to and which not. So I don't think that's really the teams just being cheap. I think it has to do with it a little bit, but I wouldn't go with it as that far. So I would kind of disagree with that point, but I understand where they're coming from as a player. I'd probably have the same mindset if I was them as well. After that, we have the one about J.D. Davis, him winning an arbitration hearing, then getting cut. That one I agree with the players a lot about. I think that is a loophole around the rules that teams just shouldn't do. With that, Davis won an arbitration hearing fair and square, and then gets cut and barely makes any of it. I'm not exactly sure how the payout structure for arbitration works, but I think that is inexcusable, and I think there has to be some rule about that if a player wins an arbitration hearing or something like that, he can't be released or traded for this amount of days, yada, yada, yada. So I agree with the players on that, Mark. I didn't really think about it in that way as well, so I'm glad they brought that to my attention, and I think it is a fair criticism. So overall, for those reasons, I do think there is kind of some unrest within the MLBPA and why they may want to replace Bruce Mayer or talk to Tony Clark about some new rule changes. So I think it makes a lot of sense. Going away from that now, as I said, we kind of have three main things, and then we'll get out of here. The next thing is Jackson Chourio. He is making the Brewers opening day roster. This is a guy who got a big extension from the Brewers this season, is going to be a big part of their core, and is going to be a big part of their future. I think makes a ton of sense to get him on the opening day roster. I think he was going to make the opening day roster as soon as they gave him that contract. Makes a ton of sense here, and I think is a great move for the Brewers to get him on the roster, get him some experience already, and overall is a good move. And I'm excited to watch Jackson Chourio here and to see what he can do on opening day. DJ LeMahieu, we learned, is going to be missing some time, and most likely will be missing opening day after an injury in spring training. Again, just another injury bug for the Yankees. Was going to be slotting in as their opening day third baseman, and now will probably be missing some time. The Yankees really can't catch a break here, but again, that's baseball, and these things happen, so not too worrisome, I'd say. You have a lot of infield depth, in my opinion, so I don't think it should be a huge deal. Get one of your younger guys in there and give them a chance. If they don't perform well, not a big deal, but if they do, you get DJ LeMahieu. If they do, you can replace him with DJ, and DJ can play more of a utility role, or you can get them as another big part of your future. So those are the topics I want to talk about. thank you so much for watching the show today. We'll be back here tomorrow talking about some new segments, and thank you so much for watching. Follow us everywhere you can get content and updates: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all that. So thank you so much for watching, and it is appreciated, and see you tomorrow. Bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go